Looks like we are live now.
I'm afraid we've lost Commissioner Chavez.
There's a note here on the chat that says he's asking to be accepted back in. He's on his phone.
He's back in. He's back in now. Well, at least he should be. Oh, okay. There. So one of his devices is in, but they're about to put his other device back in. They had to change who the host was in order to get the streaming thing fixed. So they're switching it back to us so we can let him in.
All right, once we get a quorum reestablished, we will kick off. I guess Mario is in. Mario, if you're in, text us or speak to us. Yeah, Mario's asking for the host to add him back in. I guess y'all already working on that, Jeff?
Working on being the host again. They still are. They have not turned it back over to us yet.
And I think Lyndon's been trying to get in too, for what it's worth.
Thank you for letting us know that. As soon as they make us host again, we'll be able to see that and let him in. Okay, it looks like they've just turned over the hosting back to us, so should be able to get them in there now.
There's both LBJ connecting and Mario connecting.
Looks like they're both in now.
Got you guys.
All right. All right. Welcome back, Mario, and welcome, Commissioner Johnson. Could we, Mr. Clerk, could you please do a roll call?
Commissioner Atkins.
Here.
Burrell. Johnson.
Here.
Young.
Here.
And Chavez.
Here, sir.
We have a quorum.
Okay, so we have a quorum. Mr. Commissioner Chavez, would you please lead us in a prayer?
Sure. Committee members, guests, please bow your head. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day that you have blessed us with. Thank you that we have the privilege to work for the parish and do the will of the people. I pray that we do it as you would see fit. Thank you for the many, many blessings that we have in this city and in this region. And please watch over us and help unify our city. In your son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. Commissioner Young, would you please lead us in the pledge?
Yes. Mr. Clerk, do you have a picture of the flag?
There it is.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
The United States.
of the United States of America
One nation,
and to the republic for
indivisible,
which it stands,
liberty,
with liberty and justice for
for
all.
all.
Thank you.
All right, there we are. Do we have any agenda additions?
We've not received any agenda additions. Likewise, we have not received any public comments for today's meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any new business?
Well, first, I'd like to just draw your attention that the certificate of teleconference is attached as required. And that would then bring us to your first item, which is discussing the internal audit of Public Works adjudicated property program draft report.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Yes, so Madeline Covington with Postal Wait in Netterville will be speaking to us about the internal audit of Public Works, in particular, the adjudicated property function of Public Works. Thank you for joining us, Madeline. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Commissioner Atkins. I'm sharing my screen with the report. So if you guys can't see that, just let me know. As Commissioner Atkins mentioned, my name is Madeline Covington, and I will be presenting the internal audit of Public Works adjudicated property. So I'll quickly go over the table of contents of our report. On the call today, I will cover the objective and scope of the internal audit and the executive summary. Their results and additional appendices are included in the draft report that was provided and attached to the meeting agenda, but I will not cover that in detail today. Of course, if you have questions, I'll cover those at the end. So moving on to the objective and scope of the internal audit, we conducted an internal audit of the Caddo Parish Public Works Department to assess applicable internal control processes of adjudicated property, including compliance with relevant policies, procedures, and Louisiana Law Revised Statute Title 47. The following areas were included in our scope: sealed bid sales, civic source sales, redemptions, and records management. So to go over a little bit, an overview of our procedures, we obtained policies and procedures and other public works documentation pertaining to the adjudicated property process. We performed interviews and process walkthroughs with Public Works Department personnel and performed sample-based testing to determine if sealed bid sales, third-party civic source sales, and redemptions were supported with appropriate documentation and process per policies, procedures, and regulations. And the scope period for our testing was January 2019 through February of 2020. So based on the procedures we performed, we identified 2 low-risk observations. So in the results section of the report, there are additional details related to risk, root cause, recommendations, responsible party, and management's response. So that information is there, and I'll cover any questions on that. But at a high level, the 2 low-risk observations were first, one related to records management. Data related to adjudicated property was manually entered into multiple data sources, and a secondary review of data inputs was not always performed. So a little bit of background on this one and the multiple data sources. Public Works is utilizing an adjudicated property database, but it does not necessarily contain all data fields that are necessary. So they're also utilizing multiple spreadsheets to document certain information in addition to paper-based files for certain other documentation related to the adjudicated property process. And related to policies and procedures, we observed that the Public Works Department policy for adjudicated property was not always updated to reflect certain current practices, and several key process areas were not included within the policy. Additionally, detailed desktop procedures did not exist for all key process areas. And so, as I mentioned, specific recommendations related to those observations are included in the results section, but at a high level, we recommend that management consider implementing an enhanced data management process and assessing the need for automation in their process to improve inefficiencies or reduce potential errors. And we also recommend regarding policies and procedures that management should consider establishing a formal policy management process in order to ensure that all key process areas have been documented and that they're reflective of their current procedures.
All right. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Madeline. Any questions for Ms. Covington while she's got the floor? I will shortly be calling on Tim Weaver to provide his group's perspective on the recommendations. But go ahead, Commissioner Young.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Roy, hi. Did you
Thank you, Commissioner Atkins. I just wanted to ask, the policy changes that you suggest us considering.
I can't hear him.
Neither can I.
Yeah, I can't hear the question.
How much those cost for organizations to put into place or similarly situated to change, to make these changes? Can you hear me now? Am I
Well,
audible now?
yeah,
I can hear him now.
we lost you there for a while. It sounds like
Am I
you're
audible now?
Why don't you, would you mind putting it on chat, John Paul? Maybe we can read it easier,
Sure.
and then I can read it out to the group. While he documents that question, anyone else have any questions?
I just want to apologize, Mr. Chairman. I thought it was at 2:30.
Well, no worries, no worries, Commissioner Burrell. We actually have only been up for about 7 or 8 minutes. We had some difficulty with our streaming. We were all kind of waiting, so you had a much better process dialing in late.
Okay, great.
Oh.
All right. All right, so Commissioner Young is asking, how much might a new policy process implementation and or new data entry point cost us or a similar institution? So I
Okay.
think that Tim Weaver will address some of that, John Paul, in his responses. I know they're looking into some of that.
Could I ask, Mr. Chairman, could I ask what the question was originally?
Well, that is his question. The issue is, Commissioner Burrell, do you have the document in front of you there? Actually, you see it on the screen. Commissioner Young is referring to a data management system or data management process, and Postal Wade Netterville's recommendation that we look into revising or perhaps acquiring a new data management system. And I think John Paul's asking how much would such a system cost if we were to go that route.
And that's to manage adjudicated properties. As you may know, I serve on the state adjudicated property, tax sales committee that we make all the laws dealing with adjudicated property.
Well, I was not aware of that, but we're talking about adjudicated property, managing adjudicated property process and all the data associated with that process.
Okay. Well, may I ask this? But it just so happened I have somebody in my house that lives with me that deals with adjudicated property with the city. She's over it there. Have we looked at their process of how they deal with it, the database that they have?
Hey, Chairman, I can take this really quick if you'd like.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Roy, the issue isn't on adjudicated property. I was gonna wait to ask my question whenever the IT department came in, but what they're doing is they're identifying holes in the process that could be better done. And one of the issues is they have to log data into different portals, and the solution, and it's not specific with adjudicated property, it's just specific with multiple data inputs at any process. we need to come up with a format for an API, which would be something that our IT department would have to do if we didn't purchase another single sourced portal, which is what John Paul Young is suggesting. So the issue isn't exactly with adjudicated property, it's with the management of data flow into multiple portals. And we're trying to identify how do we access that now? How do we solve the problem that they've identified to us as a risk factor?
So we're basically dealing with just our data processing system, not in a particular area of data entry.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Okay.
Mhm.
As it relates to adjudicated properties.
Yeah.
And the good property sales process.
Yeah, Chairman Atkins.
Yes, sir, Dr. Wilson.
Yeah, typically what we do, we have issues of this type. We'll put together a committee to go out and see what's available in the industry that would meet our needs. And then we will get some kind of idea on what that would cost us. And then we will eventually roll that into our RFQ type of process to remedy that issue.
Well, let me ask you one other question, Mr. Chairman, before we go forward, because I'm trying to get my head around the basic question, which is a data entry. It appears that, and you go back and say, well, it's also associated with adjudicated properties. But that is not the only issue that I'm hearing you say. And that leads me to go back to say if ours is not proper, and if we're going to look at another example that is doing the best, I would say best practices in providing this data entry, and we have a source right here near, which is the city, and not saying that theirs is perfect, but just scratch that. I'll wait until I hear all the information, because it's something I'm missing here. There got to be something I'm missing.
All right. Is Tim Weaver on the phone, or Dr. Wilson? Who from the administration would like to comment on the observations made by Postal Wait in Netterville?
I'm here, if you can hear me.
Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, we're not aware of a system that's like mainly just designed for adjudicated property, but we will get with our IT department and see what we can, come up with, or an outside source and design something. But we mainly use just the spreadsheets for, different reporting, where we just keep up with, how many sales we do, how many redemptions we do by month, and then by the end of at the end of the year, we have a spreadsheet with all our results that we do. And then to answer the other question, we work every day, every week with the city of Shreveport, and we're not aware that they have a system either. Because they're usually up here at least on a weekly basis, because we have dual, taxing body with the city and the parish. So a lot of the properties are, city and parish, or city or parish only adjudicated. So.
Well, that's my whole point, Mr. Chairman, in that I'm pretty fairly familiar with the city adjudicated property process, not necessarily the system. And what I'm hearing him say, the gentleman that just spoke, that they have their own problems with it. I don't know of any, but I'm sure that they probably do, of keeping up with it. But I know I've worked along with them for a couple of years on this thing, since I sit on the committee down there at the state to actually make the laws. Do we know? I mean, do we know for sure? I'll assume that our data processing people would know that the city does not really have a good system of managing the data on adjudicated properties, because we do work in conjunction with each other.
I think that, well, go ahead, Mr. Weaver. I'll let you field that.
Yeah, I mean, as far as we know, the city does not have a data processing for their adjudicated property.
Okay. All right, I'll leave it at that.
I mean, you can verify that. So.
Yeah, I can make a call and find that.
Yeah.
No. Matter of fact, I will.
All right. If you find that there is something that the parish could benefit from, please let us know, Commissioner Burrell.
I'll do that.
Any other questions? Now, let me back up and just remind everybody on the call that the internal audit identified two observations. They were both low risk observations. So I view these as opportunities for improvement, not significant risks to the financial integrity or legal integrity of the organization. Any other, Tim Weaver, anything else you want to add before we move on to the next phase on our agenda?
No, I mean, I think, overall, I think it was a good audit. We deal with thousands of different calls, dealing with the sheriff's office, the city, all the 15, 16 taxing bodies, and, to have, two low risk findings is, I think we've done a pretty good job. We've been working on this for like 20 years, and we've come a long ways and got a lot of properties back on the tax roll. So, I mean, I think we've done a pretty good job.
Well,
Yeah. I agree.
Mr. Chairman, let me ask you this question because I'm familiar with an outside source contractor that I know the city, if not the parish, deals with, which is called Civic Source.
Yeah.
And I sit on the committee with this guy down there in Baton Rouge, and I'm interested to know if Civic Source does part of this, how did the audit find their work?
Yes, sir. We are a contract with Civic Source, and they do sales also. So, and then they do sales, and then we do sales.
Yeah, so, yeah, but this is an audit. How did they do? Because I talk with him from time to time when I'm in Baton Rouge. So the guy who kind of spearheads it up in this area, Civic Source. Did the audit find anything delinquencies or anything associated with Civic Source?
This is Madeline Covington with PNN. I can speak a little bit on that. For our internal audit, we focused majority of our testing on, the responsibilities and actions that were performed by the Public Works Department. And so we did look at Civic Source sales, but our testing was more focused on Public Works role, in that process and their actions that they're, required to take related to those sales. We didn't have any exceptions in that area, which is, why there's no findings in the report related to that. We didn't specifically dig in a lot, to details of, perhaps Civic Sources, details of their documentation that they're responsible for, if that makes sense.
Well, do we have a responsibility to do that since they are an outside contractor?
I don't believe so.
Oh, sir, we have a turnkey with them, Commissioner Burrell. We don't manage their database at all. We pay for that service. That service is inherent in the contract process that they do for us, but we don't get into their system and network and manage any parts of it.
We are responsible for our interaction with them, and
yes, sir.
And the relationship, the service that we receive from them.
Right.
And in the internal audit, there were no observations made specifically pointing out issues there.
Right.
I guess my only question was whether or not how do we know that they are doing their operations, correctly and beneficial to us since we do contract with them. How do we determine that, or are we interested in that? I guess would be the question.
Well, I'll ask Tim Weaver about his experience with Civic Source and how our services have been with them and our views of their services to us.
I mean, we've been working with Civic Source. Actually, we're one of the first clients to sell a property, but they have identified a lot of properties, and they actually do a good job. And when we still like notarize and close and file their properties, so we were checking and work day to day with them you know, so far, you know, I think they've done a good job for us.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all I wanted to know, Mr. Chairman, because I know that they are involved with adjudicated properties and they are outside contractor. And I didn't know whether or not our audit covers their operation too, in terms of making sure that we get the bang for the buck.
Yeah. Yeah. Last year, Civic Source sold like 29 properties for us in 2019, and in-house we sold 83. So that's kind of the numbers
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Okay, thank you. Anything else on?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay, who's that, LBJ?
Yes.
Go ahead.
And Ms. Covington, in the audit, did you see where we had two different adjudicated programs going at the same time? And is that a problem? If you did, is there a problem?
You say two different ones?
Yes, we got two different ones. We got the one with Civic Source, and then we got the one for District 3.
Yeah.
We didn't identify a problem with it. You know, we saw the use of Civic Source, and from what we can see, you know, Civic Source is selecting properties that they want to sell. But at any point, a citizen, you know, can, you know, inquire about a property, and the parish can sell, you know, those properties, you know, through the sealed bid process as well. And then, you know, the citizen would be responsible for, you know, recouping those fees that have been paid, you know, by Civic Source. And so from our perspective, and, you know, Louise and Laura, correct me or jump in if you disagree, we didn't see the problem with, you know, having this sealed bid process done by the parish and then also using Civic Source to supplement those sales as well.
Well, I mean, it's two totally separate systems. They're not even related to each other. One goes to, I think, out of the 12 districts, 11 go through Civic Source, and then one only goes to Public Works, the parish. And I was trying to see, would that be a problem, having two different systems and two different ways to do a process, and was both ways documented?
That, Dr. Wilson, can you comment on that? Is that
Yes, sir. The commission passed modified its ordinance a few years ago to allow us to pull to go to on Commission District 3 we'll have to talk to the commissioner before those properties go up for sale, because they were trying to look at revitalization on that area, because specifically it's a downtown area. And in some cases, it does slow the process up just slightly, because we have to, you know, get with the commissioner first. And as you all directed us to do through the ordinance, and then we go from there. He's correct. He's correct.
Okay.
Yes, sir, he's correct.
So let me understand this point of information, because now it kind of comes back to me, since LB mentioned that there was a particular district that either did not want to participate with the Civic Source deal for whatever reason. That's what I remember, even being down in at the state at the time. And the other districts, they kind of acquiesced to having Civic Source come into their district. Where are we with that? We're still excluding a particular district because of, I assume, certain issues that I understood then had to do with economic development and redevelopment issues.
Not that we're excluding anyone, Commissioner Burrell, but District 3 does have a little peculiarities about it, and that properties that was up for adjudication had to go through, we had to contact that commissioner first to make sure that commissioner is okay with it, because they were trying to look at community revitalization and specifically looking at certain properties for that purpose. So the commission did amend its ordinance that allowed that to happen.
But isn't that going on? Should that be going on in all districts? I know in my district.
No, well,
TDBG areas, most of them is under.
I wouldn't suggest that, sir, because we don't want to make it a political issue. Because right now it probably should be free to everyone, and then no one has actually challenged that process yet. But you know, we may be
And that's the only
challenging
reason
that
I brought
in the
it up.
future. We might be challenging that in the future. That's just
That's
a
the only
reality.
reason I brought it up, because it's a challengeable type event that's going on.
Yes, sir. It could be.
Well, I'll just talk to LB about it because it appears
Yes, sir.
that we do have some differences there. And I'm a late comer to the game, but I am familiar with redevelopment after dealing with it in this organization for 20 years. So I'm
Yes, sir.
very sensitive to those redevelopment issues.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson, for pointing that out. I'd actually forgotten about that particular aspect of our
How
process.
can you forget about that?
Well,
I guess it wasn't as dear to me as it was to some.
yeah.
Okay.
All right, let's see. Anything else that we need to talk about with respect to adjudicated properties before we move to the next item on the agenda? I'm not trying to push us through. If someone has some issues, please let us know.
I'll just make this statement. As I said, since I am somewhat familiar with the city side of adjudicated property and their process, if it's okay, Mr. Chairman, I will talk to Malcolm. I think his name is Malcolm Lentz.
Yeah, Malcolm.
Malcolm Statlander.
Statlander.
He's up here once a week talking to us.
Right. Yeah, I can understand that because they're so closely related. I mean, they're so closely tied in terms of the parish and the city's adjudicated property. That may be an opportunity to do some shared interests and you know, from a technology standpoint, to buy into a system that we can both use that be used for dual purposes.
Well, you're certainly welcome to explore that, Commissioner Burrell. We appreciate your interest. I think you'll find that there's a good bit of knowledge sharing going on already between the two organizations, but it certainly never hurts to loop back with them and see if there's something that's been overlooked.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, stepping on to the next agenda item. Let's see.
We've got the discussion of the internal audit status update.
Yes, I think Louise Henry was going to update us on the internal audit status. Louise, are you out there?
Sorry, I was just having a little bit of technical difficulty. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
For the status update? Great.
I think we got the right one.
Okay, perfect. Make sure I'm sharing the right one. Yeah, so we'd like to take this time to provide an update of the internal audit function for the 2020 auditable areas, as well as follow-up activities. So as a recap, the internal audit plan was approved during the November 7th, 2019 commission meeting. That included juvenile service probation, adjudicated property, and facilities and maintenance related to the Caddo Correctional Center. The audits for juvenile probation and adjudicated property are complete. With today's meeting, we will, look to finalize our draft internal audit report for adjudicated property after this meeting. And we do have the audit for facilities and maintenance, Caddo Correctional Center, scheduled in July. This will likely also be remote audit, but ultimately, as we continue through our planning phase, we will make a determination if that changes. We've already coordinated with the Director of Facilities and Maintenance at the Caddo Correctional Center on the potential remote nature of this audit, and they were in agreement with that. And so in addition to completing the Caddo Correctional Center Facilities and Maintenance internal audits, we will also begin planning for the risk assessment And so we will be looking to conduct that in the fall. The risk assessment is going to aid in us in determining the proposed internal audit plan for year 4. So several of you were involved in that risk assessment process the first time around when we were doing that for years 1 and 2. And so we will be reaching out to the commission as well as Caddo, employees for that process. So before I move on to our follow-up activities, does anyone have any questions regarding the 3 audits that we are slated to conduct this year?
I don't believe so. I don't hear any, but just one quick question, Louise. On the risk assessment, so we're doing another risk assessment to rank the remaining entities that need to be audited, or are we looking at going back and taking a second look at things?
So for the risk assessment in the fall, we would look to kind of redo that process where we are working with you all to determine those areas that we would look at for 4 and 5. At this time, I don't believe there would be anything that we would necessarily repeat from these areas because we are performing follow-up activities. But again, just best practices to refresh that risk assessment process, based on changes that may have occurred. We will certainly look to the prior one, but we're still determining what the best way to go about the risk assessment for the next year or 2.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, point of information.
Yeah, 1 minute, Commissioner Burrell, and then I'll give you the floor. But I just wanted to follow up on the risk assessment. I just wanted to remind us that some commissioners had a problem with our risk assessment approach the first time around. They felt like there wasn't a sufficient input from the commissioners, that there was more, staff input and less commissioner input. I didn't necessarily share that concern, but I just want to raise that up to make sure we push hard to get commission input to ensure that we don't have that discontent moving forward.
Yes, certainly. And if we go the survey route again, I think last time we made it available to all of the commissioners and the select employees to respond to, and we'll likely follow the same procedure where we open it up to everyone to provide their responses.
Okay, let's just make sure we push if you don't get sufficient input from commissioners, give them ample opportunity so that everybody knows that they had ample opportunity to provide their input. I just don't want any pushback, afterwards saying people didn't have a chance to give their input.
Right.
I thought we had different ones planned out for the next couple of years.
We did. I think she just wants to take another look at the remaining ones and make sure everybody's happy with the.
Yeah. So typically, we have a list of all of the auditable activities in the parish. And just because that was the initial risk assessment was performed 2 years ago, we just want to make sure that collectively we are looking at risk from a current perspective. A lot of things change within 2 years.
Well, what I don't want to do is go back and audit the same area twice and one area don't get audited at all. So that's why I was saying that we were basically going through and prioritize which ones we thought initially was the higher risk and then go down to the other ones. Because now you got a whole new list of commissioners. So they missed the ones that were done last term. And so they can say, well, I got a high priority of doing NGOs again. Well, we just did NGOs. So you're going to turn around and redo NGOs again, which doesn't make sense.
Commissioner Johnson, what I'm hearing, and Commissioner Burrell, I'll get to you in a moment, sir. But what I'm hearing her say is we'll look at the balance of the unaudited entities on our list and just check back with the relevant parties, the commissioners and the staffers, to make sure that, and to reassess those and hit the highest priorities of those remaining.
Okay. All right. As long as we don't try to go back to ones that was already done, that's my issue.
Louise, did I properly reflect your plan?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, and I mean, we primarily want to just make sure that we're looking at the risks to the parish. And so, you know, we are going to work with you all to identify what those are. So.
Okay. All right. I think we're good there. Commissioner Burrell?
Well, I guess from being a new kid on the block along with John Paul, I guess from my perspective, you know, I guess I would really need to look at the risk reports and see exactly what we're measuring, since this is basically new to us or new to me. But one question I would have on the juvenile services, since we're appear to be getting ready to make changes to those services, the risk assessment that they're making now will not, I assume, will not encompass that. This is just stuff that's we've already, meaning the existing situation that we're in, not the proposed situation that we're looking at in terms of adding, what is that, 17, 18-year-olds. We just went through that in the Juvenile Justice Committee. Will that be a part of their risk assessment, or that's totally excluded? Because I see that as a risk.
Well, audits by nature look at the current situation, and they're backward looking. They're not necessarily forward looking.
That's correct.
But you do raise a relevant point, and that's something that the organization needs to be thinking of as we move forward. And then when the future becomes the present, then it will fall under the jurisdiction of this audit plan.
Yeah. But isn't that right upon us? I thought there was a sense of urgency there, and I'm not saying that they need to readjust what they do. It's just that if it's that close to us, should we be looking at a little wider scope, sort of, I would say futuristically, but to make sure that whatever our risk is now, that we can move into the new risk pool, if I can use the term, based upon the fact that this is right upon us.
Yeah, Commissioner Burrell, if I can indulge you for 1 minute.
Go ahead, Dr. Wilson.
He said the current objective of this internal audit is to look at current operational procedures.
Okay.
It's not to look at best industry practices at all. This is not that type of audit. It's just kind of look at what we're doing, whether or not we are doing things in compliance with our operational policy. Will that be the current operating policy of state law as it applies to what we do? Okay. So it doesn't look down the road and say you got 17-year-olds coming, you need to change this, change that. That's not the objective here. The objective is what are you currently doing, and as are you in compliance with what you're supposed to be doing right today?
And if you're not, what might you do to fix it?
That's correct. That's correct.
All right, I'm good.
Okay. All right. Anything else before? I think we're now about to move into the follow-up activities. Go ahead, Louise.
Okay, great. Thank you. So related to the internal audit follow-up activities, the follow-up is in progress and pending receipt of either information or documentation for the previous audits that were conducted over Caddo Parish Animal Services, NGOs, and vendor and contract management. So we are still reaching out and working with the management over those areas to determine kind of what steps are needed. And then the follow-up is actually complete for juvenile services detention. And so over the coming months, we will continue to follow up with the respective management of each of those areas.
Okay. Do you need any help, quote unquote help from administration or the commission with respect to these pending receipts of information? Are you getting the response you need?
I believe for Caddo Parish Animal Services, we are working through the documentation we received for their policies and procedures. For NGOs, I believe that is one where we are waiting potentially on a response from the commission on one of the observations. Madeline might be able to provide more context on that, but I believe we've reached out on one of the observations that remains for that area.
So when you say the commission, you mean the staff?
The NGO committee.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Madeline Covington. I can speak on that one a little bit. That email was sent out maybe about a month ago as a follow-up to a prior email. There was one observation in the NGO internal audit report that was more for the commission and I guess the NGO appropriations committee's consideration related to kind of standardizing the criteria for awarding NGO funding. And so really what we're looking for as a response is just, for that to be considered by the group and then either, yes, we will implement it or, no, we're not going to implement it. So just some sort of resolution, that it has been brought to that committee and considered and a decision has been made. And so we haven't received an answer back on really what the decision was on that item.
Okay.
Let me be clear. Is she saying that the NGO, since I sit on the NGO committee now, that you're kind of looking for a checklist to standardize the way funds are awarded? Is that what I'm hearing her say? That's what she needs?
I can provide a follow-up email. I don't want to, misspeak on what our exact recommendation was and all of the context. That, I can send that. Who do you guys think would be? I believe we sent it to the Appropriations Committee chair, but I don't, and the Commission chair as
which
I'm not
changes
sure if
every
that needs
12
to go.
months. So.
I'm sorry.
Need to send to the clerk office. That would be a better focal point, because what you're asking for is a commission to develop some certain protocols that it'd like to see it carried out in regards to NGOs. And that's a function of the NGO process in the committee. So I think the clerk would be the ideal person to send that information to get an answer back as to what the commission's desire in the process. But we have standard application, as you know. We've been talking about standardizing processes, but we still, based on their recommendations, have to do some more work in terms of refining what we do.
Great.
Is that correct?
Send that. Yes, sir. So I'll send that out to the commission clerk so they can distribute that to the group for more conversation, and hopefully we can work on getting a response back on that one. And I'll reattach that audit report so that it's reviewed again by the group.
So basically you want us just to be able to put NGO into a formula, and from that formula, that would be what they get.
No, I think for the NGO observations and recommendations that we made, I mean, ultimately, I think through the NGO Appropriations Committee, I think it's a process of kind of going through the report and determining if that is, through our recommendation, something that you want to accept. Certainly, the recommendation doesn't not have to be accepted, but it is there as part of our internal.
Well, that's what I'm trying to understand your basically your recommendation, since I am chairman of the NGO, because we have a process in place. There's an application process in place based upon the need of the organization. That's pretty much how we've been allocating funds. Some organizations come in and ask for $40,000. Well, they don't actually get the 40,000. They might get 10 or 5 or 8, whatever. But it's based upon the need, the service that they're doing to the community, and based on how far out does that particular NGO reach. If it's just a one neighborhood type, then the funds have been limited. And as it goes out into the parish, the funds become more and more. So, I mean, based on what I'm hearing you say, is we need to have a formula for that. And so you plug in the need, the want, the area, and then it populates this is how much money they get. The problem I have with that is that all NGOs are not created equal. And so therefore you'll have some disparity in that. And that's what I was trying to keep from having. Looking at it from a structural side, that would be perfect in a perfect world, but we don't live in a perfect world. So that's why you really hadn't got an answer back.
Point of information, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Commissioner Burrow.
Based upon what LB is saying, is she saying, is the auditor saying that their recommendation is giving us a suggested framework that we may look at to see whether or not it's conducive to their audit function, or she's saying, just like LB just got through saying, well, we have our own process and we need to either tighten it up or make it a little bit more standardized or something that would better fit their audit function. Does that make any sense?
Well, I'll let her speak to, I'm not sure if that's Louise or Laura who's speaking, but I'll let them speak for themselves. But I'm under the impression it's more aligned with your second statement, that they're looking for for the NGO committee to provide some additional structure around the process, but they aren't necessarily recommending. I'm not aware of a specific process that they're recommending. I think,
but it has to be based upon their observation, or else they wouldn't be making a recommendation.
well, I will
Does
yield.
that make sense?
I'll yield to postal weight at this point and let them speak for themselves.
I mean, that's just my way of thinking, because of the way the way the information was proposed or suggested.
Roy, I'll fill you in on that offline, Roy.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, Lyndon, go ahead. Does postal weight have anything to add?
I think for the purposes of this, we can certainly resend the report, and we are open to the response that you have, and if you would like us to participate in additional conversations regarding that recommendation, we're happy to. Again, those are just recommendations for your consideration.
All right, so I might suggest that one, postal weight resend the report to this committee, and that will include the NGO chair, and then the NGO chair can meet with his committee and decide how they'd like to respond. But Lyndon, I'll just ask that you all please respond to postal weight one way or another, just so they can loop back and have completed that process. Is that okay with you?
That's fine. I can give them a real good statement, but I'll wait till I give up the committee.
Okay. All right. Does that sound like a good process moving forward then?
I'm good.
Okay.
And then lastly, we just have Appendix A for y'all reference, just to capture the dates of all the prior finance committee meetings and when we issued our prior reports.
Okay.
And so with that, if there's any other questions.
Any questions? I think that concludes that. Thank you all very much, Louise and Madeline and Laura. We appreciate y'all dialing in. One more chance, any questions for postal weight before they go? Okay, any other issues before the committee? Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Yeah, Commissioner Atkins,
Yes, sir.
I need to talk to you. When's a good time to call you?
You can call me right after we hang up if you'd like.
Okay, then I'll do that.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Okay. All right, thank you, sir.